Tropospheric undulations every night on Weather Center PM.
In the next half hour, Weather Center PM, a comprehensive national forecast. At 40 after, Weather Center PM continues with highway and air travel conditions. Then the weekend outlook. And at 50 after, Storm Watch. But right now, it's your local forecast on the Weather Channel.
Tragedy strikes northern Georgia as a tornado destroys homes as well as families. We'll have the story for that region plus the entire nation coming up on this edition of Weather Center.
Thanks for joining us on this edition of Weather Center, sponsored by ShopVac. Deadly tornado left a path of destruction in Hall County, Georgia early this morning, and that leads our look at the nation. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sharon Resulti.
And I'm Paul Emick. The Northeast braces again for more weekend snow. Looks pretty sloppy. We'll have the full details coming up in the forecast, as well as a live report from Syracuse, New York. We'll see what's happening there. That's coming up just a little bit later. But first, let's talk with the action and what happened earlier with the tornado in Georgia. Now, these were the scenes this afternoon from Hall County in rural northeast Georgia. The tornado hit around 6:20 a.m. 11 people died and more than 80 were injured. The tornado damaged not only homes, but schools and farms as well. Governor Zell Miller declared a state of emergency in several counties after touring these areas. It's not at all unusual for tornadoes to hit in the early morning hours. We'll have a detailed explanation in just a moment, but first let's look at the current situation across the east. Let's look at what's happening here with the big system. You can see that pretty much the western U.S. unaffected by so many things, but right now not much happening. Eastern U.S., different story. There's an area of low pressure. Now this is the same mechanism we've been dealing with since, it was like 3 days back in Colorado, maybe back further than that, but remember the big Colorado snow into Kansas and onward? This thing still has a life, still moving on. Action's still the same. Low pressure, you can see the upper level low. You can see where it's spinning, right like that. Counterclockwise motion, dragging in some moisture. Where you see the brighter white, that represents the best amount of moisture being pulled in here. Still wrapping in some cold air, too, on the cold side here. That's why we are seeing a little bit of snow at times tonight, falling around Bloomington, around Champaign, Illinois, too, around Belleville, around St. Louis, and even around St. Louis, an occasional little bit of sleet. But the storminess, that's one of the bigger stories as more wet weather gets drawn in here and the stormy stuff. Moisture being drawn in up there, and also we can look to see where the moisture is very evident in the lower levels of the atmosphere by checking the dew point. That's the best direct measurement of the amount of moisture available at the lower levels of the atmosphere. That's sticky air, literally. Around Raleigh, a dew point of 61 is pretty dramatic. Contrast that with a dew point of 10 around Minneapolis. The larger the number, the greater the capacity to hold moisture. Moisture, one of the big ingredients to fuel big storms. That's what we've seen. We've got the moisture. We have the lift. That's the front. That's what's making the difference. The cool air behind, the warmer, soupy air ahead of it. We have the lift, we have the moisture, we have the instability, plus the proper upper level conditions to set off more tornadoes. We sure do. We have still a tornado watch in effect here in the portions of North Carolina, still for a few more minutes. A tornado warning in effect for Granville County. Again, Granville County with a tornado warning for just a little bit longer. Also a severe thunderstorm watch in portions of Virginia. Let's look at this big line of storms. In portions of South Carolina, still quite stormy, but some of the stormier spots have been around Raleigh-Durham. And on northward, we still expect more storms tonight in the parts of Virginia, too, so we'll keep you on top of this here at the Weather Channel. A little closer vantage point indicates still, again, a very stormy night for the Raleigh area. Earlier, quite stormy, too, around the airport. Another vantage point to show this would be the lightning, where you see frequent lightning strikes, where you see the white blotches. That's lightning strikes about the last 10 minutes. That represents a lot of lightning, and usually we see a correlation with a lot of heavier rain, too, where you see a lot of lightning. Things are getting quieter in Florida, except across the Keys right now. The front is kicking on through. Going to make a big difference. Still wet weather in the south parts of Florida. Tampa looking much drier, but the Keys around Duval Street tonight, if you're out there, wow, pretty stormy spot to be, pretty wet still. On the cool side of the system, a little snow also around parts of Pennsylvania. It's primarily a rain event presently, but around Binghamton and Ithaca, New York, it's rainy. Around Buffalo, Elmira, Niagara Falls, Rochester, a bit of freezing rain is being thrown in here at times. So it looks like a pretty interesting night. Snowfall, yeah, it could be picking up some 3 to 6 inch amounts. You have that to look forward to. Also a bit of snow in the parts of Michigan. Around Cincinnati, it's pretty quiet now, except for just a little bit of wet weather around town. Earlier this morning, though, it was mighty wet, very windy, too. Winds gusting around 40, stoplights and signs blown around, lines blown off trees, or limbs blown off trees, rather, on the streets, and even the cars and power lines had a lot of problems, too, when you have that much wind and that much water. Again, things are quieter in Cincinnati tonight, but still wet weather and even some more snow to talk about. Let's talk a bit about some of the storminess and what happened across Georgia. With that, here's Sharon Resultant.
Thanks, Paul. You know, most people think that tornadoes are fueled by afternoon sun, but this certainly was not the case early this morning in Georgia. Sometimes in the southeast, the storms can peak in the wee hours of the morning. Here to explain why is senior meteorologist Colin Markey.
Thunderstorms are fueled by warmth and moisture in the lowest part of the atmosphere, so you would expect that thunderstorms and severe weather would be most active when it's hottest at ground level, that being the late part of the afternoon. However, in the southeast and the Gulf Coast, there's another maximum of severe weather in the early part of the morning, and the reason is during the cold season, in the winter time and the early spring, when we have low pressure systems traversing the Gulf Coast, basically what happens is a lot of the times you'll see a line of thunderstorms get going out ahead of the cold front, and they are fueled by what we call the low-level jet. That is a river of fast-moving air, a couple of thousand feet above the ground, oftentimes moving between 20 and 40 miles an hour. This has a lot of warmth and moisture associated with it coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, fueling the thunderstorms, and that low-level jet usually attains its maximum speed in the early part of the morning, therefore sustaining thunderstorms and oftentimes severe weather into the early part of the morning across the Gulf Coast.
Thanks a lot, Colin. Turning to the rest of the country now, spring officially began at 2